The thing that led me to wanted to become a firefighter was my brother Willie Martin was a firefighter, and he came from reading water meters for the city.
Okay.
And I read water meters for the city also with him. And when he became a firefighter, I was reading water meters one day, and happened the location was at his house, and he was sitting on the back porch. I think he had some lemonade or something that he was drinking, and he said, "Hey, buddy, how you doing? Kind of hot out there, isn't it?" And I said, "Oh." He said, "Man, I tell you, I don't miss those days." My brother told me that I wasn't going to find many minorities in this field of work.
Mm-hmm.
And I was directed what day to go to the training, which was held at different locations at the time, because the Broward Fire Academy was not really, established for that.
Okay.
So I showed up, at the place, and I'm looking around. And I thought maybe I was at the wrong place at one point, because I looked around, and it was 96 people there going through this course. And out of the 96, I was the only black there. And I was like,
And when was this? What year?
this was in 1978.
Okay.
And I was like, okay. But I said, I'm not going to worry about that.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to do me. And during that time of training, there were some times that I know that I was singled out because I was the only black there. And what this one particular captain, Fort Lauderdale had, I think, 3 officers there, and each department had, their representative. And this particular guy, he walked over to me and he goes, "Oh, I know you're going to be a top student because Willie Barnes is your brother." And I looked at him, and the whole time I was going through my training, I didn't even see my brother. I didn't even talk to my brother, because I wanted to stand on my own 2 feet.
Yes, sir.
And he knew I would, so he never checked on me. And this officer, whenever he was in charge, he always found the most complicated question, and he would always say, "Charlie Barnes," and he would always throw these questions at me. But my wife, if she was here, she'd tell you, I studied day and night.
Yes, sir.
Because I know that from some of the things I learned or heard about in the past, that I was going to be picked out to be picked on.
Yes, sir.
So I was ready for that. And he didn't really like the fact that every time he tried to show me up, I was able to handle what he did. And I remember when we took the state exam, the state guy was doing everybody, and at this point, everybody was doing fairly well, but I hadn't missed anything. And this same captain walked over to him and said, "How's he doing?" And he said, "Exceptional." And he goes, "Oh, okay, well, we'll see about when we do the layouts." So we did this layout, and the most difficult layout we had, I studied it because I figured it was going to come up. And he called that layout, and I went to it, and I went through everything, and when it was set up and done, the state guy walked over and he looked at everything, and he's marking. So he said, "How did he do?" He says, "He did pretty good." He goes, "No, he didn't." And he says, "What?" He said, "He screwed up." And he said, what did he do wrong?" He said that, he forgot to put the inline valve or whatever it was out. And well, I know at that point, there was nothing I could say, because it was like, I'm going against the officer. So I never said anything. But we had another captain that was working with him named Stan Jensen. And I walked over to him and I said, Captain, I said, can you tell me what I did wrong in that layout? He said, which one did you have? So I told him, and he just chuckled. And he walked over and he looked and he looked, and he walked over to he said, well, what did he do wrong? He goes, well, he forgot to put the inline valve. He said, it's right there. He forgot to do, whatever he said, it was there. So he turned to him and said, look like you screwed up. So the next day, we didn't have uniforms at that time because we were trainees, rookie trainees, so they didn't give us uniforms. So we just had to come dressed the way we were. And I came, and at that time, Black Power was kind of like just coming around, and people, and I had on a shirt.
Yes, sir.
That all it did was had a fist in it. That's it.
Yeah.
He walks over to me and he goes, "You're out of uniform." And I said, "Out of uniform?" He goes, "Yeah, that's a racist shirt you wear." So I had to leave and go home, change my shirt,
Wow.
and come back. They said, "Well, we got some good news and we got some bad news." And I'm like, "Okay, what's the good news? What's the bad news?" The good news is you guys did get hired. The bad news is you won't be going on shifts, you'll be going to inspections. Well, the other guys, they were livid because they had other side jobs that they, so they said, okay, we got to draw straws or whatever. And Bob Radigan drew the straw where he had to go in the inspection. And he was having a fit. So I said, listen, I know it wasn't my decision who goes where, but if he needs to be on shift, I'll take the inspection job. I said, a job to me is a job.
Yes, sir.
So we made the switch out. And one thing I could say about Radigan was he never forgot that, because he told me had he not been able to switch, he wouldn't accept the job because he was a plumber and he had his own business. At that time, it was Bobby Glenn, my brother Willie Barnes, Ernie Isaac, and Mike Harper. I really didn't. My thing was, my mother was always a person that said, no matter how good you do, there's always room for improvement.
Yes, sir.
So she said, do what you can do. And I always kept that in my mind. I tell you, that was a fiasco also, because after taking the lieutenant's test, the list came out, and I was okay with where I was. I wasn't happy, but I was okay. And then the list was revised, and when it was revised, now that's when I was not happy, because I dropped like 7 spots.
Wow.
Because they were giving points to people, for this, that, and the other. And I was like, okay, what can I do? There's nothing I can do. And there were some chiefs that had sons on that list. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, they opened up 8 positions in order to get all of them. And I ended up being number 1.
Wow.
And now I'm sitting there, and they said, well, you're gonna die on the list. And I thank God for our city manager, our mayor, at that time was Connie Hoffman. And I always volunteer for a lot of things. And the city had a picnic every year. Mm-hmm. And I always volunteered to help cook, serve, whatever. And during the picnic, Connie Hoffman walked over I was sitting with my wife, and she says, Charlie Barnes says, is that your wife? I introduced her. She said, I need 2 of you come take a walk with me. So we walking around the park, and she said, listen, you have been an asset to the city since you've been here. You know, said, I know of your background. The personnel department, you know, they've gotten, because I got a lot of accommodations, recommendations of doing different things. Mm-hmm. Not that I tried to, but that was just part of me.
Yes, sir.
And she said, I want to ease your mind. She said, the lieutenant's test is coming up. She said, but don't study for it.
Wow.
I was like, what? She said, you deserve that position. You've been overlooked. She said, I'm on the way out, but the last thing I'm going to do, if it is to get you promoted.
Wow.
She said, so don't worry about it. She said, when the time comes, just accept it. This conversation is between us. And I said, wow. So just before the list ended, Chief Lane calls me in his office, and he said, Charlie, I brought you in here for some good news. He said, now a lot of people, you know, not happy, and a lot of people told me that I didn't need to do it. He says, but I'm gonna promote you because you deserved it. And I says, well, I really appreciate, you know, that, and I'm glad that you thought enough of me, and I'll do the best job that I can do. He says, I'm not worried about that. You know, he said, but I just wanted you to know. So after I walked out out of his office, the funny thing is, you never know who's listening, and you never know who's paying attention. Mm-hmm. And there was the chief secretary, who, after I came out, she said, let me buy you a soda. And I'm like, buy me a soda? They don't sell sodas in here. So we went in the kitchen. She says, don't you believe that malarkey? Hmm. She said the chief was told that he had to promote you, because if he didn't, there's going to be some repercussions. Wow. So I said, okay. Now I'm made lieutenant. The news wanted to come over and do an interview. I was called into not by the chief, by one of his assistants, and said, listen, you're not to talk to the news, you're not to talk to the newspaper, you're not to talk to anybody about this promotion. You know, so all bets are off.
Wow. And how did the news get wind of it?
I have no idea, you know, but they came over. I think it was Channel 7, I'm not sure, okay. But they wouldn't let me talk to them. Okay, fine. Then the females started coming on, and Rhoda Kerr made lieutenant. Channel 7, Channel 4, Channel 10, Channel 6, they were all there video filming. It was in the newspapers, you know. And I just looked and I just thought about, you know, what Mr. Williams, you know, had said.
Yes, sir.
We're not them. We're not going to be treated like them. So that didn't bother me, you know, at all. It was just the fact that I guess my badge didn't mean as much as her badge did, you know. But, you know, I wasn't going to let that stop me, you know. I really wasn't. One guy I never ever forget, and he died recently, was Herbie Blaben. Let me tell you, that guy right there, when I first made lieutenant, he was at the station. Bobby Glenn was my driver, mm-hmm. And Herbie Blaben was the driver on another truck. And he says, hey, buddy, come in, I want to sit down and just talk with you a little bit. And when we went to sit down and talk, he said, listen, he says, you're going to be like in a fishbowl. Everybody's going to be watching you. He says, no, I'm not worried about you doing the job. He said, but everybody's going to watch you. So dot your I's and cross your T's.
Yes, sir.
He said, there's a lot of people in here not happy with you being promoted. A lot of people not going to want to work for you. A lot of people are going to put stumbling blocks in your way. Mm-hmm. He said, are you ready for that? I says, whatever comes my way, I'll handle it. And he told me, if there's any time that you need to talk to somebody or if anything comes up, I'm here. And, you know, he was always that way. Yes, yes. I walked in a station one day when my first year as a lieutenant, and I heard two guys said, I'm gonna quit, because I ain't having no N-word, you know, telling me what to do. I didn't grow up that way, and I'm not gonna, you know, take no orders from them. But they never quit. There were times that, you know, you heard about this guy not having your back, you know, and that you know, you never forget that. If I'm in a fire, is this guy gonna really, you know, put forth the effort if I need him, you know, or are they gonna do? Because there were so many pranks and so many skits and so many things that happens in the fire station that you never believe. We went out to the Davie because people would donate houses for burn, and again, I was the only black there, and we were in teams, and we at this house, and this owner of the house that was being burned, she came over to watch, and I saw her, you know, she was a white lady, she walked around, and she looked really disturbed, but, you know, I paid no attention, and I heard her say, whenever that end get off my property, I want you to dig that grass up and throw it out. And I'm like, whoa. So when I heard that, I guess it kind of angered me. So what I did was, which I'm not proud of, but I did it. I walked all over their yard. I said, if she gonna have a dig up the whole yard, you know. And I to the day sometime I think about that, you know. Oh yes, I didn't have the problem inside inspection with the people, but out in the neighborhood, I would go out and you know, inspect places, and I tell them, you know, that you got to do this, that, and the other. And most of the time, they just kind of looked at me, and then they would kind of comply. But there was a gas station. I walked in, and this guy, he had a shotgun. You could see the shotgun in the station. He says, "Can I help you, boy?" And I looked around, and I said, "I'm Inspector Barnes. I'm here to inspect your building." He said, "You ain't inspecting shit here." And I said, "Whoa." So he said, you say you an inspector?" I said, "Yes, I am." He says, "City of Fort Lauderdale don't have any inspectors, you know." So I went to get on my radio, and I think it's summer skill I called him. I told him what kind of problem I was having. So he told me, said, "Well, just back out. Don't worry about it." So now I hear the guy on the telephone, he's telling somebody about, you know, this in coming in trying to tell me this, that, and the other. So I don't know what the outcome of that was. But when I had to go back over there, I went back and the same guy was there. And he said, "Well, I'll be damned, you are an inspector, aren't you?" You know. Now he wants to be my friend because he has a lot of things that was out of order and out of place. Now, I didn't take it out on him, but I made sure that everything was in order the way it was supposed to be, because I didn't want him to think, number one, I was afraid of him, or I was out there to do something to get back at him. Mm-hmm. But he corrected the things, and I never had another problem out of him. When I became an arson investigator, you know, that was something that I was proud of, because I didn't know at the time that there were no black arson investigators in Broward County.
Wow.
So I became the first, you know, arson investigator in Broward County. You know, so you know, I was like, I don't want to be the first to do this or first to do that, but you know, somebody's got to do it.
Yes, sir.
And one of the things that I am proud of when I was an arson investigator, there was a lot of kids setting fires. And a lot of them were angry, a lot of them was inquisitive, and a lot of them were just going to get back at people. And I remember this 4-year-old set his mother bed afire with her in the bed.
Wow.
She got burned, not much, but, you know, and it's an arson. They called it arson. So the next thing I know, the police is in, and he handcuffs this little 4-year-old boy. And I said, why are you doing that? He said, he committed a crime. I said, committed a crime? I said, he may not know, you know, what was going on. I said, I haven't even had a chance to interview him yet. I don't know what's going on. So I said, you mind taking the cuffs off him while I talk to him? He goes, well, you can talk to him with the cuffs on. And then we had another fire, maybe about 6 weeks later. And not because these kids were black that it bothered me with them handcuffing, but because they were kids. So there was I don't remember the chief's name, but he was a chief with Broward County. And he was an arson investigator also. And I said to him, I said, do you think that these kids should be arrested, handcuffed or whatever, or even have a record? You know, and he says, yeah, but that's the law until we get it changed. You know, I said, well, we need to do something. So about 6 months later, he called me in and says, I just got a support group together. Would you like to be part of it? Yeah, I would. So we came up with a program, this juvenile fire setters program.
Wow.
And that program would not allow police officers to handcuff
Wow.
kids. And I was so proud of that. I would like to say that I'm very glad to see the number that we have of minorities now in these positions. And strive, you're in great positions, but strive, just try to get one step higher as you can go. Now, your situation is not like mine. We had Chief Spar, who was, I thought, was a fairly good chief. He came into me once. I was in inspection, and that was a position as plans manager. Roger Edwards was a plans manager. Mm-hmm. And there was an opening coming up where nobody else in the department was qualified to fit that position, so they thought. I put in for the position, and they said that I wasn't qualified. And I took the sheet of the qualifications, and I took my documents to Chief Spar. And he said, well, it certainly says here that you're qualified. He says, well, who said you wasn't? I said, the fire marshal told personnel that I wasn't qualified. So we went to personnel, and they said, well, according to this, you are qualified, but because the fire marshal deemed you not, we're going to stand by his word. Wow. Chief Spar, after that, he told me, he says, I'm getting ready to leave now at the end of my career. He said, but let me just tell you one thing. you're not going to go any higher than you are because they're not going to allow you to. And he says, but you've done a good job under my tenure, and I appreciate it. Okay, I accepted that. And then we had, his name was Gerald, right, that came in the court.
Son.
Yeah, came in as we thought we had him as a fire chief, because he was a liberal, he was ready to go. And I'm at Station 35, and he comes in, and he says, I need a tour of the station. Chief Summerskill was there at the time. He said, but I want this lieutenant to take me around. So he chose me. We went up, and we made it look like he was touring the station. But we went upstairs, and he said, brother, I want to talk to you. Seriously, man to man, chief to lieutenant. He said, I looked at your history. He says, you have done great things on this department, but you've been overlooked. He says, now I was going to take this job. He said, but this city, this county, this state ain't ready for me. And I said, well, he said, because I'm a liberal and they're not ready to come up to the grade level of what they need to. He said, they asked me what was my changes for the next, show them my 5-year plan. He said, and in 2 years, I had you at battalion chief. He said, I looked at your qualifications. You're more than qualified. He said, but they told me they see the plan, they understand it, but it'll never be implemented. He said, now, I had a couple of other blacks that's going to be elevated, and that was too much for them. He said, and I told them either they accept the changes or I don't accept the position. He said, I'm just going to tell you out front, your time for promotions will never happen here as long as you're here. So I took that for what it was worth, and I told him, I appreciate you telling me that, because I felt that, but I didn't really know that that was exactly what was going to happen. So then we had Chief Latin to come in. Now there's a position for assistant fire marshal. Now the fire marshal that was in place at the time, I trained him. He came in to inspection and prevention. He knew nothing about it. He rode with me for a while. And, you know, he learned. And when that position came up, it was really only 2 people that was really qualified for that position. But it was 5 that was on the list. And the one that was number 5 was not really the best of it. And I was called over to personnel, and they told me that I was going to be getting that assistant fire marshal position. Well, now I'm thinking it's okay. I got it. And even Commissioner Carlton Moore at the time told me, says, yeah, I think you're in there. Well, the chief comes in, and he meets with us, and he says to me, he told all, he says, I'm going to take some time and before I make a decision. So he says, anybody have any suggestions? So nobody said anything, and I said, Chief, I just got one suggestion. I says, you don't know any of us really. I said, there's 5 of us. I said, why don't you take each person, put them in that position for 6 weeks to maybe 3 months to handle it, to see how they work out. If you think that they, will fit, and he says, that's a good idea. Okay. 3 days later, I get a call from him saying, I need you to come to my office. Came to his office, and he said, now, I made my decision of who I'm going to promote. He said, unfortunately, I can't promote you. And I said, well, why is this? He said, well, you got to realize that I'm a black fire chief coming in. you're a black firefighter. You're a black inspector. If I promote you, they're gonna say I promoted you because you're black and I'm black. And I say, well, Chief, if they said that, why can't you tell them I promoted him because he's the most qualified for the position?
Yes, sir.
Because I could have stayed another 3 years. My time was up, but I could have stayed another 3 years. But I started having medical issues. So I put in my papers to retire. And he called me in his office again. And because they needed the system, the fire marshal was gone. The assistant fire marshal had to go away. They needed somebody to come in to kind of run the department for him. And he asked me, because I was thinking it was for a month, if I would go in and help out. And I said, Chief, I'm still on the books. If that's what you need, I'll go over there and I'll do the best job I can do. So I was over there for about a month. And he came to me afterwards and he says, what did you do when you were there? I go, what do you mean? He says, everybody's saying that they had a lot of fun and the job was a little different when you got back in there. I said, yeah, because when I walked in, nobody was speaking to anybody in the morning. Nobody would talk. And I said, I didn't understand that because we always gathered and we always talked. And they said, well, he said, what, it was different. I said, they said they weren't allowed to talk to each other. And I said, every morning we had a like 15, 20 minute of anybody got something they wanted to do. And I remember maybe before the end of the week, one of the secretaries came to me and says, you're going to get in trouble. And I'm like, why am I getting in trouble? He said, these people are happy. He said, when they come back, when the upper guys get back, they're going to be mad. So the chief called me and he says, listen, I see you turn in your papers. Mm-hmm. I said, yeah, I did. He said, will you do me a favor? I said, what's that? He says, if I give you an acting battalion chief job or acting assistant fire marshal job, would you stay for 6 months to a year just to help us through it? I said, Chief, one thing my mother always taught me was, don't act. Be yourself. I said, I don't want to act like nothing. Now, I'm going for the benefit of my health. I'm not going to stay here because when you had the chance for me to be here, it didn't happen. And I said, good luck and God be with you. And I saw him about a year later. I come in, he goes, hi, you know, you ran across my mind the other day. And I'm saying to myself, yeah, right. I just like to say one other thing.
Yes, sir.
I want you guys to continue, because I am when Ms. Flowers told me how many minorities we had on this job, yes, I was really happy. I was still a little disappointed because we're not where we should be at this point. Right. But I remember Chief Frazier, when he first came on this job and we were out at the Broward Fire Academy. He may not remember the day, but I pulled him aside and I said, you know what? I said, I realized there's something about you that I picked up on. I said, but you gonna be a chief here someday. And he looked at me, he says, really? I says, I guarantee you that. I says, because you have the motivation. I've watched you. I said, you just continue doing what you're doing because you'll be there. Wow. I said, but what I want you to do is uplift somebody else. Yes, sir. To get them to where they can be all you can be. And I see him now, and every now and then we'll laugh about that. But I am so glad. I had never met you until that day I was coming out of the office, and you told me who you are. And I called Miss Flowers, and she goes, oh, yeah. She says, yeah, you never met. I says, no. I says, I see a lot of minorities that I just don't know. Yes, sir. You know, I said, but I thank God, you know, for them. But, you know, we just need to do just a little bit more. Yes, sir. You know, to try to get it where it is. But I am very, very proud of you guys. And keep up the good work. Yes, sir. And it's gonna be all right.
All right, thank you so much again.
Sure.
Have a good one.